of
Loud
Haunted
Librarians.
Historians. My name's Sean Murray, and with me are two gentrified folk, the great Rod Smith and the
Hello,
incredibly
hello.
talented Declan Doyle. Gents, how are you?
Incredible. Not a bother. All good form, thanks. No complaints.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. We're on the cusp of Easter.
Fine
You all
introduction.
set?
No.
I don't know how do you get set for Easter other than buy an egg these days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cut the grass.
That's it. You have a share. Have a share. Whatever you can do to
Spring
sort it
rush.
out properly. That's good. And this is great. Like this is consistency, lads. We've done this is one again in 2 weeks.
There you go.
Our second one in a week. Actually.
Yep.
Sorry, I have a phone going off here. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, listen, will we move on and get the show on the road? Declan, I'm going to pick on you first this week. If you'd like to weave your historical magic for us.
Now, I've been threatening with this lad for a few weeks anyway. Jimmy Galton, born in Leitrim in 1886 in Effina in County Leitrim. Family were a small farm, 25 acres, and the land was garbage, so they weren't really properly living on it, you know. So time he reached 14, he disappeared off to Carrick to work in various places. That wasn't great either. So shuffled over to, now bear in mind, this is the turn of the century in Ireland. Yeah. Shuffled over to England and joined the British Navy. That didn't go great either. Wasn't keen on going to India to flex the muscles of the colonial group. So he was disciplined over this, so he deserted, actually. He ended up working in the docks in Liverpool and then in the mines in Wales, and eventually nipped over to New York and did a few jobs there and then joined the US Navy. So that was grand. So then the War of Independence came along and his brother had fallen ill, or he was dead. Wasn't well anyway, and was incapable of working the farm. The parents were both elderly and ill as well at the time. So back home he came. Now, back up in Effina, the county hall that was there was destroyed during the War of Independence. So out of an element of boredom, him and his friends, and to fill the void that the parish hall had left, decided to rebuild the hall. So they did, and they call it the Pierce Connolly Memorial Hall. So they had various activities in the hall, ranging from teaching children various parts of their culture and heritage and extra education. It was used then for Sinn Féin courts for land disputes. Music hall, we'll come to that in a moment. So that was fine. He then got into a bit of bother with the church and the IRA. His socialist leanings, they weren't too keen on. So he then disappeared back to New York for about 10 years. And then arrived back in Leitrim in the early 30s. Hello. Reinvigorated the hall, but ran into a lot of difficulties with the church and the local IRA groups because he was considered a communist, which was not appreciated. The form of socialism was too extreme for anyone's liking. He also ran of an evening in the hall, Irish culture nights, traditional music. He also did a bit of jazz. Now, jazz was the music of the devil, as we all know. So that fired the church even further. So a campaign was waged against him by the church and the local area group. The hall was shot at while people were inside of it. It had bombs thrown at it, the whole lot. Quite a hectic period went on. And then his father died. And 2 days after his father had died, he was handed a deportation, well, his mother was handed a deportation order for him. So he became the first and only Irishman to be deported from Ireland. Because he'd been in the US Navy, he'd automatically been granted citizenship, which isn't done nowadays, So they considered him an American citizen. So there's absolutely no crime with deporting him. There was a lot of fighting going on with the councils at the time, because one of them nominated him. There's some fascinating footage on YouTube if you go wandering, of people who were alive at the time and did various radio interviews. They're all recorded in RTA. Fascinating listening. But you have one gentleman whose father was the councillor who brought forward the deportation order in the first place. Fascinating. His account was fascinating. So again, he was the first known Irishman to be deported out of Ireland. So he went on the lam for about 6 months. He had many friends who'd hide him, but he was eventually caught and he was sent back to the States. Sent to the States, where he spent the rest of his life until he died in, I think, 1945. 1945. During his time over there, he wasn't quiet either. He'd formed various groups aligned with Communist Party thoughts and feelings. So he lived there for the rest of his life in the States, never came back to Ireland. And a couple of years ago, our current president, or it was in 2016, our current president Higgins unveiled a statue to Jimmy Gralton. So a strange character from our past, and the one and only deportation of an Irish citizen.
It sounds very hard.
Jazz and communism.
Yeah, but it sounds very harsh to be kicking him out of the country because they didn't like his music or his political tastes.
Yeah. Lived in strange times back then, though.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
There was a film made by Ken Loach called Jimmy's Hall. If you come across it, really, really worth a look. And Ken Loach makes amazing films also, so
he does.
You know.
Okay, and was it the film that inspired you to research it more?
Exactly. I seen it many years ago. But an amazing story, and one I had not heard about at all.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah, I must look out for that movie.
It's really worth a look. So, Jimmy's Hall by Ken Loach.
Excellent movie recommendation out there for you folks.
Oh yeah.
You had
spoiler alert all over the place though.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll move on. Thanks a million, Decky. And lads, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, this week we're going back in time a bit to Italy in the 1300s, Bologna and Modena. And Italy, the Italy that we know now, was only unified in the 19th century, but we're going back to the 1300s when Italy was all a combination of city-states and small areas and districts all fighting with one another. And Bologna at the time, which is now famous and well known for its bolognese sauce, and the University of Bologna, and Modena, which is known now for its balsamic vinegar. You'll actually see Modena balsamic vinegar in the shelves, and also Ferraris and the Maseratis as well are made there. But back in the 1300s, Italy wasn't a united country, and you had different sections of people, some who supported the Pope and some who supported the Holy Roman Emperor. So the Holy Roman Emperor was a kind of a jazzed up king at the time, where they tried to replicate the Roman Empire. And this king would rule over certain countries throughout Europe and would call himself the Holy Roman Empire. So you had various factions in Italy who were behind the Pope and various behind the Roman Empire. So Bologna was all about supporting the Pope, and Modena, they were supporters of the Roman Empire. And they were always fighting over land, trade, insulting one another, and there was a lot of rivalries going on. So around 1325, a bunch of soldiers from Modena decided that they would raid Bologna on the sly and just go in and see what they could take and get in and get out. So during the raid, so it wasn't a full scale, just a small number doing kind of a hit and run raid on it. So while they were in there, they took a wooden bucket beside one of the main so Bologna Main Square had a well, and there was a wooden bucket beside it. And they thought, for a laugh, let's take this wooden bucket. So they took the bucket away with them, thinking it would be hilarious. But the people of Bologna were absolutely mortified, because public wells were viewed as being a sacred place because it was the only source of drinking water. And as far as they were concerned, they had taken the life source of the city. and they felt humiliated and insulted. So they looked upon this as an act of war. And they raised an army of about 30,000 people, 30,000, from Bologna and the cities around it who allowed it. And they prepared to attack Modena. Modena itself only had an army of about 7,000. But they, even though they were smaller, they were more experienced and they were battle hardened. They'd been through fights before run the mill. So Bologna marched towards Modena, intending to force them to return the bucket and to pay heavily for the insult that they had paid upon them. So they met in a place called Zappellino, which is placed in between Modena and Bologna. And even though Bologna had a huge numerical superiority, the Modenese actually, guys, beat them. Because the people from Bologna were, because they had such high numbers, they were hugely overconfident, but they were very poorly coordinated. And the Modena troops had a huge counterattack that they launched, which shattered the whole lines that Bologna had built up. And the soldiers panicked and they fled and didn't put up much resistance. And there was huge casualties on the Bologna side. But the forces then from Modena chased the soldiers all the way back to Bologna, back into the city walls, and they actually breached the outer walls of Bologna and got inside the city. They could have actually taken over the city if they wanted to, even though it was a much smaller force. But they felt that they had done enough, and they went back to Modena and they paraded the bucket throughout all the streets to hail their victory. They built a new well in Modena just to actually display the bucket, and they hung the bucket inside the city hall. And if you go to Modena today, you will see a replica of the actual bucket, which is preserved. The original is still being preserved apparently, but it's not for public use. And hundreds of years later, a famous Italian poet, Tassini, wrote a mock epic poem all about the war of the bucket and turned it into a huge satire. And it featured ridiculous generals and pompous people battling one another. Ultimately, the message was, who goes to war over a bucket? So the Bucket War itself has become a bit of a legend, and it's used sometimes as a metaphor for conflicts which escalated in disastrous wars. After all, who would really go to war over a wooden bucket? And that, my friends, is my story for this week.
That's
Thank you.
insane. That's insane.
So
Fantastically
with
insane.
buckets is, I think, is the moral of the story there. I said muck. Yeah.
That's amazing. And
Okay.
last week, you nearly everyone got to war over a tree.
Over a tree, and this week a bucket. That was a funny one. Get some people.
It's amazing what we kill each other over, isn't it? Wooden buckets.
Yeah, so wooden tree and wooden buckets. Yeah, it's the whole wood thing there going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You got wood?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good, Rods. Very good. That's another nice obscure one.
Thank you.
Very good. I'm going. I'll hop in here now, and we'll keep the pace going. I'm going probably a lot less obscure this week. It's just in sport, just a lot of interest in Ireland during the Second World War, and a few different things that happened. I was the biggest thing that happened on our soil was the bombing of North Strand, and did a little digging into that, and it's it's obviously a tragic story, and just very interested in around the context of neutrality and how it happened and why it happened. Anyway, like we would have been under De Valera at the time, and we declared our neutrality right at the outset of the Second World War, and it was like there's a few different factors, and it's quite a complex kind of thing. But it's probably it's they reckon if you dig in, it's kind of deeply rooted into our struggle for independence from Britain and how recent that was, and our reluctance to hop into bed with them straight away. But we did share intelligence with Britain, and we permitted kind of British aircraft to use a corridor over Donegal, and the Irish Fire Brigade were very quick to provide assistance to bombings in Belfast, when Belfast was being blitzed. But outside that, we kind of tried our best to avoid provoking any negative response from the Germans. So I would hope that we could be kind of shielded from the war and that our people would be shielded. Um, Brings me on to the bombing in North Strand. That happened on the 31st of May in 1941. And it was about 1:30 in the morning. And there was four bombs. I think witnesses said there were very, very loud whistling noise before the bombs hit. There were four bombs dropped by a German bomber. Um, and left a massive, massive 50 meter wide crater in the middle of North Strand. And from this, like 27 civilians were killed. I mean, one family had three generations, seven killed in all. Real sad stories around it. Three generations, grandparents, uh, mother and father, and three kids, all below the years of 8, were kind of directly hit. And they had been planning to move to Cabra the following week, which is makes it all the more tragic anyway. So it kind of all just came without warning, completely out of the blue. Um, and there's all sorts of debate on as to why it happened. Um, lots of different theories go around. Um, One is kind of a navigational error that the German bomber kind of mistook Dublin for either Liverpool or Belfast. It was never quite clarified. And at the time, obviously, we didn't have any airways, so air raid sirens, so there was no warning for this. So that theory kind of goes that at the time, Liverpool and Belfast would have been blacked out, and Dublin might have been the only visible city, and there was a mistake made. There's also another one of kind of retaliation from the Germans. I think I mentioned the assistance the Irish services provided to Belfast following the Blitz. So um, there's a theory that kind of act of solidarity with the North kind of irritated the Germans. And there's another kind of political theory that it was just a message to De Valera to remain neutral, to discourage any kind of further cooperation with the Allies. As I said, there was limited limited cooperation, but there was assistance to the Allies. Yeah, like the night of the bombing, help came from all over the country, fire brigades and ambulances. So there was hospitals in Jervis Street and the Manor were overwhelmed. There was 300 people injured, altogether. 300 or I think a similar number of homes destroyed. It was just carnage. I think I went as far as Trinity. There was parts of Trinity College damaged. Like such was the debris from the explosion that affected huge parts of the city as well. The Germans eventually, which was kind of unusual for them, issued an apology and actually provided financial compensation to the Irish government in 1958. It took that long for the Irish government. It was 327,000 or whatever. Um, but it was a lot of money at the time, and it helped with uh, building for their housing to assist the locals anyway. There's not a huge, I don't know, for such a big event, there's not an awful lot out there on it. there's a memorial park in North Stand, and there's plaques and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a big kind of symbol of, I suppose, Irish vulnerability at a time where what we used to call it, or the Irish, it was generally known in Irish as in Ireland as the emergency, the whole Second World War. But um, yeah, it just goes to show that neutrality can be shaky ground to be standing on as well. So yeah, so that's just my piece on the North Strand bombing.
Well, I didn't realize that there had been 3 generations, gosh, killed off with that. Gosh, that's horrific. And it's always something you hear about in history, but I think the numbers of dead people was something that we never have been really aware of. Didn't realize.
Yeah. And
27's a huge amount.
Yeah.
yeah, and the scale of the devastation. It's kind of lucky. The Irish government brought in a photographer as part of their compensation claim against the Germans. They were quick on the compo lookout, and they got a guy in a few days later, and he went and photographed over a number of months, I think between early June and October, the devastation across the sea. I think it's online. It's about 150 photographs, and you can see how far and wide the damage actually went from the bombing. So it must have been horrific for the people at the time.
Especially the dead of night as well, so we would have been able to sleep and everything.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, 1 o'clock and 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, it's
And the North Strand's a fairly compact area as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The houses are all tight together. And again, back then, you would have had 3 generations of people living in the one house anyway,
Yeah,
in a lot of houses,
It would have been quite normal. I suppose it's different. Looking at the photographs, there's a lot of bungalows in the area. There was a lot of tight bungalows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I suppose at least it wasn't as densely populated as it is now,
No.
You can only imagine the losses it would have taken them. But yeah, there's a whole rebuild of the area. So it's a sad but an interesting tale.
Wow.
During the drought a couple of years back, they found some of them air signs around the coast. They put down for planes coming in, and then they discovered loads of them then because they've more or less forgotten about them. There's 40 or 50 of them around the country.
Okay, yeah, a lot of the boats during just as their neutrality, they used to have the big era painted right on just to try to avoid. Sometimes it didn't work with the Germans because there was a little bit indiscriminate, but
that's submarines for you.
That's it. Yeah, it must have been such like to try and go about your normal day-to-day life and activities, especially I covered it last week, especially going to sea, crossing seas where this war raging is. It must have been a very, very strange time. And I think that's it for us this week, lads. We've been succinct. I think succinct is the word. Will we give ourselves that?
Slick and smooth, I think. Slick.
Yeah, I like slick. I'm going with slick, actually. Yeah.
I'm not often accused of that.
No, definitely not. No, I'll take that and I can get. That's brilliant. Listen, thanks so much, guys, and happy Easter to you. We're on
holiday
today.
Easter to all, yes.
And happy Easter to everyone watching or listening. And hopefully back next week for more of the same.